Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of Straight Facts, Homie, a mini camp edition of Straight Facts, Homie. I'm John Lyons alongside Walter Sabina. Our third amigo, Mason Souza, could not join us tonight, but you'll be hearing from him soon on the Straight Facts, Homie airwaves. And Walter, it's been a little while since we talked here at Straight Facts, Homie. We've had quite a few developments, including the Patriots practicing for 2 days in mini camp, canceling the third day for a team building activity. Let's start in general mini camp here. Of the 2 days that they were on the field, and if you want to expand this to OTAs, that's fine too. What stood out to you the most for the Patriots?
I think just in general, the guys kind of coming together, especially the offense, and you hear the comments after these practices when they're talking to the media saying, they're far ahead of where they were last year. And again, it shouldn't take much to be ahead of where you were last year. A couple guys have said, they already feel like, last year where they were at, when they were, I think doing the preseason game against the Raiders, they already feel like they're there, at this point in the offseason. So obviously that's a good thing to have, bringing in a guy like Bill O'Brien, being able to have a coherent, offensive coordinator that these guys can go to. And you're seeing it from Mac Jones, how accepting he is. We're hearing a lot about Kendrick Bourne and, how much he's liking the changes in the offense. And, just overall, I think the way the guys are buying in to what's going on the offensive side of the ball. You've got a lot of weapons. We've got DeAndre Hopkins coming in, to chat with Belichick and see what happens there. But that's probably my biggest takeaway is just the step forward we've taken on the offensive side of the ball from last year. And again, you can go to the defensive side, but again, for me, the biggest takeaway is the buy-in and how far we are ahead from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Walter. I think the biggest thing is that offensive, I'll call it comfort level. It feels like a lot of the players, not just from their comments, but also what we've seen on the field, they're much more comfortable in Bill O'Brien's offense. That goes through Mac Jones. You mentioned Kendrick Bourne, but it feels like everything on the field is a lot more crisp. Guys are lining up faster plays, and that doesn't mean they're perfect. They've made mistakes. Mac Jones threw interceptions in minicamp. They had offensive botched plays, but they're much fewer in number than what we saw this time last year. And we're seeing some more complex stuff than we saw this time last year. More motions, more audibling, things of that nature, different personnel packages as well. And I think, look, we had a whole offseason, 6 months long, however you want to call it, since the Patriots lost in Buffalo in week 18. And the biggest addition they made was pretty early on. It was Bill O'Brien, because that offense was 7th in points per game in 2021. We know how big of a step back it took in 2022. And I'm not saying Bill O'Brien's going to walk in and get them to 7th again, but if he can get them to 10th or 11th, that's a huge jump forward. And I think what we've seen so far, again, I keep going back to this word comfort, but I think that's what it is. Guys are a lot more comfortable, and the more comfortable they are, the better they can execute, and the more points ultimately the offense is going to score. But that's been the biggest thing for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. You use the word comfort. I use the word buy-in, and when that's kind of going around all 11 guys, and then everyone else, the subs and the other guys who are getting some time there at practice, that's what you want in your offense. I mean, we watched 17 games of offense, and every week we would do the show, we would just scratch our head and how can we accept this, and finally when it was over after that game in Buffalo in week 18, and you could talk about. You said it, the biggest acquisition of the offseason wasn't even a player. It was a coach. And now all of us, are breathing a sigh of relief simply because this guy can come in and right the ship for a guy like Mac Jones, who was under a lot of scrutiny last year and was blamed for a lot of what was going on and the failures. So to have that guy come in and to have the players, publicly saying they're on board with this, and, we're so far ahead from where we were last year, and hoping to kind of mimic what they did in 2021 in Mac's rookie year, but with Mac now going into his third year, you're hoping he takes that jump, and as well as the rest of the offense. So again, it's something I'm really looking forward to. It's the biggest takeaway now, and it'll be something we'll be watching throughout training camp and the preseason, and obviously into the regular season.
Yeah, and another unit that's really stood out to me, and it hasn't necessarily flashed in minicamp, is the special teams. And the reason it stood out to me is one of the coaches that was responsible for the offensive issues last year was Joe Judge. But as we know, Walter, he's a very good special teams coach. When he was special teams coordinator for the Patriots, the special teams unit was consistently in the top 5 of the league in most categories. It was always a well thought of unit. as well. And we've seen Joe Judge have a heavy hand in coaching the special teams this spring. So obviously with spring and mini camp, you don't get to see as many special teams true plays. You see them line up, you see them go through it, but it's a lot different than being in a game. But I think look, they signed Chris Board, which is good for their special teams. They've drafted a kicker and a punter, which I know we already talked about this offseason. But having Joe Judge with a heavy hand in that, I think is maybe not as big of an impact as Bill O'Brien, but I think it's a really big impact still, because we can point to Thanksgiving night against Minnesota, week 18 against Buffalo, 2 games that if their special teams had just been competent, they probably win both those games and they're a playoff team. So the special team, the fact that Joe Judge is taking a heavier hand in that has stood out to me as a big positive. Now, are they going to be a great unit again? I think they have a long way to go. But what do you think as far as special teams? Are you happy? I know a lot of people wanted Joe Judge out of here. Are you happy that he's here working in that capacity?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Joe Judge, we didn't want him anywhere near the offense.
Still don't.
Exactly. And his bread and butter is in special teams, where he was and where he thrived years ago. And to have him back there is obviously a good thing. Cam Accord was the guy we all wanted out. And for all the blame that Judge got on offense, put him back at special teams. Let's get our special teams, back on the right foot, and bringing in the punter, bringing in the kicker. That's fine if they get to work with Judge on the special team side. Not often I don't utter the words I trust Joe Judge, but when you're talking about the Patriots special teams and the way they've fielded units the past 2 years, I trust Joe Judge to kind of right the ship here. And realistically, another thing I think we're not to say overlooking, but we're not mentioning is the rule change on the kickoff, where you can fair catch anywhere and then it's automatically brought out to the 25. So I think that right there is going to change the dynamic of a lot more kick returns being returned on these Patriots units. You're going to see a lot of just kind of kicks, whether it's through the end zone. Guys are you're not even going to get an attempt at a kick return. So that will limit how much we're kind of doing on that aspect of kickoffs. But you've got to shore up the punt team, punt return, how that, how can you improve on that? But again, kind of coming back to the coaching, we mentioned Bill O'Brien being the large acquisition. I think another large one, like you mentioned, is Joe Judge going to the special teams unit and having a large hand in what they're doing.
Yeah, and another thing that stood out to me is the rookies, specifically the defensive rookies. We talked offense and special teams, but defensively, the Patriots, to me, they had a playoff defense last year, but they do have a big hole to fill in Devin McCourty's free safety spot, and we've seen kind of a mix of guys there. We've seen 3 safety packages. We've seen rookie Marte Mapu, who was kind of a linebacker safety hybrid, get some work there. We've seen Jalen Mills get some work there. So when you look at this defense, Walter, is this a defense that you think, despite Devin McCourty being gone, is this still going to be a top tier unit in the NFL like it's been the past few years? Or is that McCourty void going to be bigger than a lot of people expect to fill?
From a personnel standpoint, I think they've got the players that can push this team towards the upper third, even the upper quarter of the league in defense. Obviously, you're losing a great leader in Devin McCourty and what he brought to that, not only that defense, but that entire locker room. But I'm just looking at the list of defensive guys, not only starters, but the depth they have on that defensive side of the ball. You're going to have Christian Barmore rotating in with Godchaw. We'll see what happens with Lawrence Guy, if we will touch on that. You got Dietrich Wise, Keon White, the rookie. How much playing time is he going to get? And then, just down the linebackers, Bentley, Tavai, Mac Wilson, Anthony Jennings, Josh Uche. There's depth there. And then, obviously the secondary, losing McCourty. But if you can slide in a guy like Jabril Peppers, who has that versatility and can come up and kind of play that, another linebacker for you, or he can drop back into coverage. Kyle Duggar, kind of the same thing. And then, Jonathan Jones, I'm looking at a depth chart right here. It's got Christian Gonzalez starting on the, on this depth chart, but you've got guys. A lot of people don't like Miles Bryant. There's something that Bill sees in him to keep him on the roster. Marcus Jones, Jack Jones, if those guys take another step this year, it's not only, you're losing the leadership of McCourty. Obviously, now we've got to find someone that can replace that, whether it be Judon, Josh Uche, someone. But just looking at the list of talent they have on this defense, I think just based off talent alone, and again, I'm looking at it on paper, this could be a very, very good defense this year.
Yeah, I would agree. I think they could be a great defense, but the McCourty thing is something they're going to have to figure out. And one thing I found really interesting, and I'm happy they did it in minicamp, is there was some times on the field where they had Christian Gonzalez starting at one corner, which, by the way, I've said this before, I think he's a week one starter, but they had him starting at one corner, Jack Jones starting at the other corner, which allowed them to put Jonathan Jones in the slot. And I don't know how you feel about this, Walter, but when Jonathan Jones has been a slot corner in his career, I think he's been one of the best in the NFL. And then you have Marcus Jones as well, who's a great slot corner. Both him and John Jones are good athletes. And what I'm getting at here is if Gonzalez and Jack Jones can be starters on the outside, that allows you to have a package with those two guys on the outside. And if you want two slot corners, Marcus Jones and Jonathan Jones, can't really go wrong there. But one of them can also play free safety because they have the athletic ability and the range. Jonathan Jones has done it before. And I think that would go a long way towards solving the McCourty void there. And I like Marte Mapu. I think he's going to play a lot. I don't think he's going to be your week one starting safety. Nothing against him. I just think it's such a big position, such a hard position to fill. They're going to probably want a veteran there. Jonathan Jones is an elite athlete. Marcus Jones is an elite athlete. So I could see that being a thing. But to me, the key to it, Walter, is Jack Jones. Because Christian Gonzalez, I think he's going to be a starter. They're going to give him every opportunity to start. Jack Jones, in the middle of last year, was one of the best corners in the NFL cover-wise. I'm not making that up. His Pro Football Focus grade, I think, was second in the NFL. He had a pick six against Aaron Rodgers, another great interception against Detroit. So he was really good, but then he gets hurt, has a suspension later in the year. There were some character questions about him in college, which is why he fell in the draft. So he is not maybe as dependable, at least right now, as we might hope him to be. That doesn't mean he won't be. But I think he's the real key here, because if he's good, they can do so many other things. And to your point, it'll allow them to be that great defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think they know, and a guy like Jack Jones knows, hey, we have a ton of guys in this secondary. I've got to, bust my behind to try to get on the field and earn this spot. And if he can, play, whether it be in training camp, preseason, to win his job, and try to get back to the player he was in those games you mentioned. He had that pick against Aaron Rodgers, the interception against Detroit, and not to mention, what he could. It was I always get Marcus Jones and Jack Jones. Which one was used on the offensive side of the ball as well? Was
Marcus
it Jack
Jones? But that's
Jones?
another thing too, that if Jack Jones and Gonzalez are your corners and you're playing Jonathan Jones and Mapu, maybe that frees up Marcus Jones to do a little bit of both. It's just something there. Again, it just gives them more and more options.
Yeah. So I think my just key, both offensively and defensively, more defensively, just looking at the names and the talent up and down the list of guys in the defense, it's just versatility. You can make all these changes, and like we see with the offensive side of the ball with the offensive line, it takes them 5, 6, 7 weeks before they settle in with a unit they like, and then they go from there. I think very well you could see Jonathan Jones on the outside one game in week one, and Christian Gonzalez on the outside, maybe. And then they move Jonathan Jones inside, like you said, and put, Jack Jones on the outside and Marcus Jones on the inside. So there could be a game they play similar on the defensive side of the ball and shifting around these guys in that secondary until they find something that works out for them. I think my one concern is if you have that wrong combination out there, is it going to cost you a game early in the season? We play the Saints early on, and we know how well they compete against us. If we drop that game and maybe drop another game that has us finishing 9-8 and maybe a game out of the playoffs. So you hope they can find it sooner than later, but I wouldn't be surprised if you kind of see that throughout the early stages of maybe the preseason and the season, finding a combo that they feel the most comfortable with.
Yeah. And so far, Walter, we've talked mostly positive things because there've been quite a few positive developments, but a couple notable absences, which I'm pretty concerned about. Lawrence Guy misses all of minicamp. Mike Reese reports it's a contract related dispute. Trent Brown misses the first day of minicamp because his flight's delayed in a hailstorm in Texas. He makes the second day. But two notable absences to me, and I'm a huge Lawrence Guy fan, I think the Trent Brown one is a lot more concerning to me, because I think with Lawrence Guy, first of all, they can work out, hopefully, some sort of contract agreement over the summer. But if they don't, well, you have Carl Davis, who maybe is not quite as good, but he's good. Christian Barmore at some point is going to have to ascend. I think he's flashed that he could be an elite defensive lineman. I know he's not your traditional run stuffer, but I think he continued to build and take steps forward. They drafted Keon White as well. So you have pieces there. You don't have a lot of answers at left tackle if Trent Brown isn't on the same page with everyone else. And I know they signed Riley Reif and Calvin Anderson. To me, Riley Reif is a right tackle. Calvin Anderson's a backup. Sidney Sal, a rookie, has potential to be a tackle, but He hasn't played tackle since 2018, his first year in college. Like, he's got to acclimate to that. Mike Onwenu, you know how much I love Mike Onwenu. He could play right tackle, but then you'd still have to probably put Sal or someone at guard. Andrew Stuber's another option. And yes, I'm throwing some names out there, but I'm throwing guys out there that either haven't played it or that are journeyman guys. And Trent Brown, I think, was really inconsistent last year, had some good moments, had some low moments. Now he's late to minicamp. And here's my thing. The Bill Belichick of 10 or 12 years ago would have said, well, why didn't you get a flight earlier, and would have disciplined him, maybe sat him out for day 2 of minicamp. And who knows? Maybe there was discipline. Maybe there was a fine. But my point is that this is the type of thing that really raises your eyebrow. Like, oh, you didn't know a storm was coming. You couldn't book a flight a day earlier. Now you're not there. There's already been questions in the past about your effort and investment level. So look, I know the Lawrence guy absence is significant. I'm much more concerned about Trent Brown.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, looking at a guy like Lawrence guy, he's got the with the contract holdout, he's got no guaranteed money remaining. So I mean, if Bill wants to move on, he could. I think he likes Lawrence guy and what he's brought to the team over the past several years. So I think that'll eventually get worked out. You have 2 months before, or you know, a month and a half before training camp starts. So I think you have time to work something there. But you know, what I'm seeing from Trent Brown is, like you said, A, he was late, B, he does one drill and then sits out the other drill. And it's like he's just completely coming to these OTAs and mini camps out of shape. So that's concerning, one. And it's like, who do you have? Dante Scarnecchia is not walking through that door to get Trent Brown, you know, back on his horse and back to the level.
Adrian Clem, sorry to cut you off, Walter.
No, right.
Adrian Clem, I think, will be a good offensive line coach, but there's only one Dante Scarnecchia. So,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, you could be as good as an offensive coach as you want, but if you can't get through to, you know, this player in this situation, it's Trent Brown. How are you going to get him motivated to be that left tackle? I'm not saying he's going to get back to that 2018 Trent Brown. We saw some flashes of it last year. I think you're going to see even less than that this year if you're going to get anything from Trent Brown. And he's got a $12 million cap hit. So it's like, you're kind of stuck in limbo there. Or do you want to try, like you were mentioning the names, you know, right now it's Riley Reif, who's more of a right tackle. If it's not Trent Brown, where do you go? Connor McDermott? Do you go Calvin Anderson? Do you go someplace else? I don't think you want to move Mike Onwenu around. You've got David Andrews right in the middle, Cole Strange to his left, Onwenu on his right. You're fine right there in the middle.
Yeah.
If Trent Brown is, I don't even know what number I want to put, 70% of kind of what he was last year, is that good enough? Because he wasn't even that great last year. So you've got some questions on the outside, and it could be one of the weaker, you know, tackle groups among the NFL if you can't get Trent Brown playing, you know, a certain percentage of what he's been in the past. So I agree with you. Alarming with Trent Brown. You still got room with Lawrence guy to try to figure out that contract. I think they will. I think Bill and Lawrence guy have a good relationship and they'll get something worked out. But yeah, definitely questionable about Trent Brown, just his sheer size, coming in out of shape. It's, you know, even at this point in June, what are we expecting come July and then August? So that's, again, my main thing with Trent Brown.
Last thing I want to get to here, Walter, is maybe one of the more fun stories, but that could have a huge impact. And that's DeAndre Hopkins. He's visiting the Patriots this week. He just visited the Tennessee Titans. Some reports are he would like to sign soon, but there's also reports that he might wait all the way till training camp to see what teams need and what they're willing to offer. Do you want DeAndre Hopkins as a Patriot?
I mean, I think anyone would say yes to that. You know, just even looking at the guys on the offensive side of the ball without DeAndre Hopkins, I like Devontae Parker. I think he could be a number one for us. Obviously, the injury history is there. Can he stay healthy? That's a big one. Juju Smith-Schuster has always thrived in like a number 2 role, even back on the Steelers with Antonio Brown. Once Antonio Brown left and he was forced to be the number 1, you saw the numbers fall off. So, you know, if Juju Smith-Schuster is playing that 2, if it's Parker at 1, I think you can get a lot of production out of them. Then just going down the list, if Kendrick Bourne's still on the team, we saw what he did with Mac Jones' rookie year. Hopefully they can continue to build on that after he was sort of in Matt Patricia's doghouse last year and didn't get much playing time. In the playing time he did get, he was productive. So I think he can be your kind of slot receiver and make things happen there. Tyquan Thornton, another guy, Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki, you've got good weapons. They're not world beaters, but I think between Bill O'Brien and the team you have, I think you can get a lot done. But adding DeAndre Hopkins obviously is a plus. And I know they interviewed Devontae Parker asking him questions about DeAndre Hopkins, and he was just, saying we're focused on the guys we got here. So maybe to a guy like Devontae Parker, what would that do to him and his psyche if they bring in a guy like DeAndre Hopkins? Can they coexist? Is he willing to kind of let DeAndre Hopkins be that number one? But I like what I have now, but I'm not going to say no to a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, who's, in his 30s. He didn't look himself this past season, but I think a fresh start for him. He could kind of do what Randy Moss did when he came here in 2007. I'm saying not going to put up those numbers, but have that kind of rejuvenated season and give us a good season or two, depending on how long he signs here for.
Yeah, and it's the last 2 years for Hopkins. He had a suspension last year that he missed 6 games. The year before that, he had an injury that's held him out about half the season. So he hasn't played a full season in a few years. He's been good when he's been on the field. And look, he's not going to be Randy Moss in 2007, to your point, where he's going to score 23 touchdowns and change the whole NFL. But he's going to walk in and be the best receiver on the Patriots if he signs. And I like Kendrick Bourne. I think he's a good player. I think Tyquan Thornton has real potential. DeAndre Hopkins walks in, he's better than all those guys. So, and Devontae Parker, I could see DeAndre Hopkins being good enough that they cut Devontae Parker or trade him. But I still think there could be a role for Devontae Parker, because even with Hopkins, their depth's a little bit thin at receiver, because you have Bourne, you have Thornton. Thornton's been banged up. So, and Bourne had a down year last year. So I could still see Parker having a role here if they sign DeAndre Hopkins. But yeah, look, do I want to pay DeAndre Hopkins $25 million? No. But if they could work out a contract much like what they gave Darrelle Revis in 2014, where it was a 2-year deal, but it was really only meant for 1 year because the second year cap hit was so big, but he got a decent chunk of money up front in year 1, I think that would be a great arrangement. If they want to come to a longer term deal after that, great. Let's not forget too, DeAndre Hopkins was a 3-time All-Pro in Bill O'Brien's offense in Houston. And I know he had Deshaun Watson too, but I think that hopefully will be a good selling point as well. Because I think if you're the Patriots, I think you are a fringe playoff team right now, probably could get in. You add DeAndre Hopkins, you're not going to win the AFC East, but I think you're a solid wild card team. Like, you're a playoff team with a healthy DeAndre Hopkins all year. So I would 100% do it. I would just caution fans that remember him as a 3-time All-Pro in Houston. I don't think he's quite that good anymore, but he still would walk in and be the best player on the Patriots. Walter, any final thoughts from minicamp and OTAs?
No, I think we hit on it. We'll have to see what happens with this DeAndre Hopkins situation. I'll probably be paying attention to that closely, because if he signs here, that opens up so much more possibilities for the offense. And I definitely think it takes us a step up, and, we could go. I think we still are on the fringe because the AFC is so good, but we're, I would say that people might have to start taking us a little bit more seriously than they would if they're looking at our roster right now.
I would agree. And there is Walter Sabina. I'm John Lyons. Thank you for watching and listening to a minicamp edition of Straight Facts Home. We'll be back soon, later this summer, to get you ready. Believe it or not, Walter, it's almost time for Patriots training camp. Thank you for watching. We're Straight Facts Home.